France, 15th of August, 1944. Nazi soldiers ask to surrender. A trusting US soldier stands up, out of cover, and is cut down mercilessly. The Germans laugh. Then 2 grenades explode above them. One man advances, firing from the hip, hell in his eyes. He is Audie Murphy. He is only 5'5" tall, and he is going to become the most decorated soldier in US history. Alone, he storms the enemy position, moving like the devil incarnate. No fear, no mercy. Born in Texas in 1925 in poverty, Murphy was going to have to claw his way to a good life from the start. He entered a school for the first time at the late age of 9 and quit in his early teens with barely an elementary level of education. In the dark days of the Great Depression, working was imperative for anyone who wasn't lucky enough to be born in a wealthy environment. And Murphy, one of 12 children raised in a farm, had no such luck. A poor family. Disruptive and energetic, Murphy was a disruptive presence in his class, even if he managed to obtain high grades in his little time spent in the school system. Out of school and poor enough to have just one outgrown pair of overalls to wear, he started working picking cotton for $1 a day. He hunted for his own food, a practice less uncommon than one would think during the Depression. He began by throwing rocks, as he could not afford a better weapon, then bought a rifle, learning skills that would serve him well later in life. He was quick on his feet, resourceful, but physically weaker than most of his peers. In 1941, when Murphy was only 15, his mother died of pneumonia, leaving him and his 11 siblings alone, as his father was an absent one. The terrible loss was followed by a desperate attempt to provide for his family. 3 of the youngest boys and girls were taken away, sent to an orphanage, and the future looked grim. With no way out for a boy with no education such as Audie, to him, when Japan's surprise stroke hit Pearl Harbor, war was a light of hope the army would provide. One problem stood between Audie Murphy and the solution to his problems. He wasn't old enough to enlist. His first attempt was rejected for this reason, but he would not be stopped by a mere number. It was Murphy's sister who found a solution by producing a fake document, convincing enough to have him recruited on June 30th, 1942. From training to Sicily. Training was, for Murphy, a net upgrade in lifestyle. He was provided new clothes, educational materials, and repaid what was given by working incredibly hard. Only 5'5" feet tall and prone to illness, he quickly became the best shot in his platoon, even asked by his corporal to teach others. In 1943, trained and ready, Murphy was shipped to Casablanca. He would not see combat in Africa, but was instead ordered into training groups for the invasion of Italy, assigned to the 15th Regiment of the 3rd Infantry Division, under the command of General Lucien Truscott. These were formative months. As he said himself, quote, "I learned more in 3 months of training in Africa than I learned in 6 months in the States." He was rearing for action, and the war would soon deliver. On July the 10th, 1943, Murphy finally made landfall in his first real war theater, Sicily. The operation was the first step in the march to Rome, an idea started by Churchill, who thought Italy to be the soft underbelly of Europe. The plan, especially its timetable, was built on assumptions made by looking at a map. To the Allied High Command, Italy looked like a highway to southern Germany. To the soldier on the ground, it looked like hell. Under the cover of a raging storm, the 15th Regiment found no resistance on their arrival. From the beachhead, Murphy and his comrades advanced into the nearby town, where first they felt the fear of shots being fired at them. Murphy himself saw a man die for the first time that day. He commented, "So it happens as easily as that?" He soon experienced the other side of the killing business when he shot and killed 2 Italian officers on the run. Sicily bloodied Murphy. turned him from a good shot into a hunter of men, and the hunt had just begun. While the Italian armed forces were rapidly dissolving, German units were assigned to protect the south of Italy, and their resistance was slowly ramping up, forcing the Allies to push themselves into longer and longer marches. Murphy, smaller than most of his brothers in arms, fell ill and was sidelined for a week, missing the conquest of the main Sicilian hub, Palermo. The last fight Murphy saw in Sicily was for Messina, the launching pad from which the invasion would jump inland. Advance into Italy. In September, after securing Sicily, Allied forces moved up the peninsula into Italy proper to Salerno. Allied forces placed their base of operation around the city and quickly found out that the Germans had set up to hold the Allies in southern Italy. The Gustav Line was a complex defensive network built to frustrate any attempt to break it by taking advantage of the Italian terrain. It was during one of the many scouting missions in the area, near the Volturno River, that Murphy began to really prove himself. Murphy's unit unknowingly advanced into the killing field of a Wehrmacht machine gun nest. One of them was killed instantly, while the unit fell under cover, pinned down, minutes from being picked off and slaughtered. In the middle of the storm, Audie Murphy rose to the occasion. He started throwing grenades and shooting, alternating the two, picking off the Germans who moved away from the blasts. 5 of the ambushers were killed by Murphy alone. 3 more kills would be added to his name during the following advance on the Volturno line, convincing his commanding officer that his skills could be used in a more effective way. He was promoted to sergeant in December, then to staff sergeant right after. While his military career was taking off, Murphy's health was deteriorating. His body was getting stronger, but still could not keep up with the level of stress of a campaign such as this one. We today know Italy as a first world country, but at the time, illnesses we today expect in more exotic locations were commonplace in the peninsula. Malaria took over Murphy's body, and he was again hospitalized, missing the deadly battle of Anzio's Landing. Murphy was able to rejoin his men right after Anzio and advanced with them into the Battle of Cisterna. The push from the beachhead, moving inland, threatened the southern German forces of being surrounded, cut off. Allied generals hoped that if the envelopment failed, it would mean the Germans had diverted themselves away from the front, allowing a southern offensive to break their line easily. When Murphy marched from Anzio, he was a veteran among many fresh recruits who just entered the fight to take the place of those dead on the beach. Their orders were to take the town of Cisterna, as intelligence thought the Germans had mostly abandoned it. The information proved to be wrong, when in a burst of fire and bullets, the Rangers of the 15th Regiment were counterattacked by infantry, surrounding the imposing figures of more than 17 Panzer IVs. Again, Murphy found himself in an ambush. More than 700 Americans became casualties in the Battle of Cisterna, at least 300 dead. But in the middle of that hellish confrontation, Murphy excelled. He not only survived, but was promoted to platoon sergeant. In this new role of authority, Murphy led his men during an unexpected encounter with one of the feared German tanks still patrolling the area. His squad was hiding in an abandoned farmhouse when he spotted the metal monstrosity, and alone, he crawled out and lobbed his rifle grenades at it, disabling it. This action earned him a Bronze Star, soon to be followed by a Combat Infantryman Badge, awarded in May 1943. As the war kept marching on, Audie's honors kept coming. Into France, into hell. When Rome fell on June the 4th, the situation of the Italian offensive was now clear to even the most stubborn Allied general. The way north was just one fortified position after another, and the so-called soft underbelly of Europe had revealed itself to be quite tough. Even after its government and army had collapsed, focus shifted to the long-awaited French offensive. of 1944. D-Day would come from the north on June the 6th, 1944. And on August the 15th, Operation Dragoon was about to hit the south. Murphy took again to the sea and landed in southern France. When Murphy and his men were again ambushed by the Germans, the now decorated veteran had enough experience to know what to do. Quickly, he disappeared, even from his own comrades, to find a new advantageous position to engage. He ran under fire, flanked the Germans, and shot 2 of them before they could react. Quote, "I judged the range, pressed the trigger, and turned the stream of lead on anything that remotely resembles a kraut." The firefight was over in a few seconds after Murphy and his best friend charged one last German machine gun, killing both soldiers operating it. Latty Tipton, a man from Tennessee, 14 years Audie senior, had formed a strong bond with the Texas boy, the kind of brotherhood created by facing deadly danger together. Both veterans, both capable fighters, they knew how to survive, how to adapt to an ever-changing battlefield. But all it takes is one mistake. 2 of the remaining Germans screamed. They were surrendering, and for who knows what reason, Tipton, who knew this could be a trick, believed them. He stood up to take them in and was dead a second later. This moment proved to be a turning point for Murphy. Something inside him snapped. He charged up the hill. As reported in his Service Cross appointment, quote, "He dashed alone towards the enemy strongpoint, disregarding bullets which glanced off rocks around him and hand grenades which exploded as close as 15 yards away. Closing in, he wounded 2 Germans with carbine fire, killed 2 more in a fierce, brief firefight, and forced the remaining 5 to surrender." Murphy's testimony, though, tells us he accepted no prisoners. Murphy's war had just changed. He was a careful, brave soldier, but after losing his best friend, he threw caution to the wind and courted danger on every turn, as if his life held little value. When he could volunteer for missions, he did, and when he couldn't, he often just tagged along anyway. He was awarded a Presidential Unit Citation for his actions at Montelimar on August 27th. Then his run was momentarily stopped again. He was wounded on September the 15th by a mortar shot, but was back in action soon after playing dice with death. On October the 2nd, he cut down 4 Germans holding a machine gun nest and earned a Silver Star. Quote, "The Germans spot me instantly. The gunner spins the tip of his weapon toward me, but the barrel catches in a limb, and the burst whizzes to my right. Another wound on October the 26th, a far more serious one, finally forced him out of combat for a significant amount of time right after being promoted to lieutenant." One has to marvel at the speed of Murphy's rise in the ranks of the army. He was still a barely educated man, too small and too young to join the army, a boy from Texas who was supposed to achieve little to nothing in life, and yet was regarded as one of the best by those above him. Last stand in Alsace. The march of the 3rd Division was impressive. From the Mediterranean coast of France to the town of Holtzwihr in Alsace. When in January, Murphy rejoined his unit, they knew the fight was nearly over. But while the result of the war was a foregone conclusion, on an individual level, the Wehrmacht was still able to end the life of many, resisting the Allied advance at every step. On the 26th of January, the counterattack came for Murphy and his men. The fight began with a solid hit. Anti-tank ammunition was shot by the Germans into the M10 tank destroyer supporting the boys of the 15th, followed by a wave of infantry. In the midst of the panic, Murphy moved fast, ordering his men to retreat to the edge of the nearby forest. He knew such a movement would expose them, running in the open under enemy fire, and chose to be the wall that would protect them from harm. He jumped on the now disabled M10, shooting all the way up. And now armed with the 50 cal machine gun on top of the tank, he stood alone. A magnet for German fire and attention. Tens of Germans, At least 50 were shot in his last stand, and Audie himself was hit in his leg. The time gained by emptying the machine gun magazine saved most of his unit, while the artillery directions he gave through the tank radio stopped the German attack in its track by sheer suicidal heroism. Using the tank's radio, he managed to direct artillery fire, finally winning the day. This was the fight that finally gained Murphy his crowning achievement, the Medal of Honor. The only question was now if he would survive long enough to receive it. Promoted to first lieutenant, Murphy was now supposed to stay away from danger, but as he could not be trusted not to charge into combat, he was ordered away from the front line to the regimental headquarters. For him, the war was over. A Hollywood destiny. Back home, Murphy's fate was still to be decided. He was now a war hero, holding an unprecedented 28 medals. But he was still uneducated, unfit for the rigorous academic process of becoming an officer. In the end, Audie Murphy received an honorable discharge and became a revered figure, acclaimed in parades and interviewed for Life magazine, until his notoriety was noticed in Hollywood. Murphy's journey was, in itself, something of a movie. From the lowest of the low, hunting game in Texas with rocks, he suffered immensely, losing siblings to the system, then friends to the fires of war, and rose above his station by his deeds. Given his chance to appear on the silver screen, a tiny little man with no artistic background to speak of, he gave his all. Training in acting and dancing while again completely broke. It was during this difficult time that a senior screenwriter, David McClure, pushed him to write his memoirs, To Hell and Back. Published in 1949, the book turned out to be an immediate bestseller and gained Murphy his first chances as an actor. He would star in 44 movies, engraving his name in Hollywood history.